so sorry you went through all that harassment by people like Rachel Oates. I'm so disappointed with her and the secular community. I used to be a fan of hers and really wanted to believe she'd do the right thing. It was so frustrating to see the secular community call the issue of Woodford's transphobia drama and then come rushing to the defense of Oates. Now we are starting to see the real tangible effects of their transphobia being pushed into law. I feel nothing but contempt for them.
She's at it again, threatening self-harm in a community post, saying that you make her do it. I found your channel thanks to that and subbed to yours and unsubbed from hers.
She literally just made a community post saying that your videos have caused her to self-harm. Huh. I'm glad I didn't just take her post at face value. The way she's talking in these clips does sound transphobic.
Are the people who follow Rachel Oates gullible? Rachel Oates certainly seems to think so, at least as far as her behaviour is concerned. I don't share her view, however. I think that the majority of them are simply individuals who have fallen victim to an incredibly manipulative and outright abusive personality who has done everything in her power to bury the evidence regarding her actions. And if you're one of said fans who's watching this, if you're willing to listen to question what it is you've been sold by Rachel Oates, I'd like to show you what I mean using evidence that you can check for yourself. But before that, I just need to give a content warning for the following topics: transphobia, self-harm, suicide, abuse, victim blaming, gaslighting, domestic abuse, child grooming, and child sexual assault. If you like our work and appreciate the research put into each video, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon. You can also support us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. Hi there, my name is Apple Thurston, and today we'll be discussing how Rachel Oates doubled down on both her transphobia and her weaponizing of self-harm, as well as the many ways she's learnt to hide said abuse from her audience. This video is of course a response to a series of claims made about me by Rachel Oates following the publishing of my recent video discussing Rosa Dawn's defense of confessed serial rapist Lily Cade. You can find a timestamped link to that video in the script and references document linked at the very top of the description, allowing you to reach your own conclusion based on the evidence presented. Or at least you can if you're not inside the UK, since Rachel Oates abused YouTube's legal claim system to have said video blocked in the UK. We are currently fighting said claim, but it will take time. But anyway, that's what the numbers that will be appearing in the top left represent, whichever reference I'm currently using, giving you full accessibility. I also go out of my way to timestamp any clips I use, just so you can check to ensure nothing has been taken out of context. So with that made clear, let's move on to Oates' post. We're going to work our way through, line by line, discussing anything that really sticks out to me. So yeah, let's get to it.
Apparently Essence of Thought is back again with more vicious lies and slander and bullying after years of me being asked to be left alone.
So not even one line in and Oates has already lied to her audience. Now, why do I say she's lied? Well, you can't really say that you've been asking to be left alone for years when only a couple months ago you decided to include me in one of your videos, as we can see in these clips from Oates' skin picking video.
And then the Essence of Thought stuff kicked off and they just got super nasty, and it was just like relentless online harassment, and I couldn't deal with it. And so we moved here and I stopped worrying about money, and Essence of Thought finally left me alone.
Again, this video was originally posted on the 6th of October, just over a month before I began working on my expose of Rosa Dawn. So according to Rachel Oates, she's allowed to continue to mention me in her work, in spite of the fact that I've had her blocked on social media since May of 2019, more on that later, yet I'm not allowed to do the same with evidence of what I'm saying. It's almost like she's creating a double standard. What's worse, however, is the fact that this isn't even the first time she's done this. As gone over in my previous video, Oates stated on the 2nd of September that she had left me alone for the 3 months I'd had her blocked in no uncertain terms. Only problem is, here's Rachel Oates just over a week earlier in a video published on the 25th of August.
I spoke about it in my live stream the other night, but a certain YouTuber who we all know spread some lies about me recently released a video in which they said, basically, you're criticizing me for this and this. It's a good job I don't self-harm anymore. and then basically went on to say or imply, if people keep criticizing me for this and this, who knows what I'll do. I might hurt myself again. I don't want to get into the details, but this is an issue that is incredibly, incredibly personal to me, and I found his words disgusting. You never, ever, ever use something like self-harm to threaten other people. When you have that problem, that's your problem. And you cannot threaten other people with it. You cannot say, well, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't treat me like a normal person, because I'll hurt myself because of you. That's manipulative and disgusting, and it trivializes the whole issue of self-harming in the first place. And I found it completely disgusting. It is not okay. And of course, it completely, detracts from the issue that I know for a fact there is someone who, as a result of that YouTuber's behavior, has self-harmed. Not naming names, not pointing fingers anywhere, but I know for a fact that has happened. Why is that only an issue when it's a trans person self-harming? Because that's what the YouTuber seems to think. Anyway, sorry, getting off point. Really annoyed me. It's disgusting behaviour. My point is, you never, ever, ever try and control someone's behaviour by threatening violence against them or yourself. It is not okay, and it is never, ever acceptable. This is something I feel really, really strongly about.
And here are some clips from the 20th of August stream she mentioned, in which she went on a 27-minute rant about me. Just to confirm, it is me she's talking about.
But Essence of Thought did something the other day when he made his video about Thomas that I'm surprised more people haven't called him out for, because I think it is disgusting and manipulative. And he tried to shield himself from criticism by using self-harm as this, you can't touch me or I might hurt myself. You can't criticize me or I might hurt myself. And that is so manipulative to his fans. It's manipulative to his critics, it's manipulative to everyone, and it's so disrespectful to anyone who self-harms. Yeah, so Essence of Thought was essentially part of our group, if you want to call it that, before he, I don't know, decided to try and take us all down, whereas him and his little group of friends all decided to block us, all decided to block us and get mad at us and all sorts of stuff. So if anything, they're the cliquey ones, but I don't know, probably just being petty now, aren't they?
Yet she felt confident enough to assert publicly that she'd left me alone for 3 months. 3 months during which, again, I had her blocked. I blocked her shortly after I replied to 2 of her Twitter posts defending Woodford in May, after which I mentioned her in passing in a single video, and that was it. At least it was until Rachel Oates' close and personal friend, Holy Kool-Aid, tried to force me to unblock her on her behalf. Kool-Aid and the others spent an entire day trying to force me to debate Oates about my humanity as a trans person, and I just told the lot of them to fuck off, posting the following to Facebook to explain my reasons. Quote, I feel I should clarify some things on Rachel Oates since people keep asking me things, though this will be my final post on said person. The reason I blocked her was simple. She was incredibly hostile to trans people who suggested that Woodford is responsible for the content he puts out, including the harm it has caused. I also found her later approach to be incredibly two-faced. Her lack of knowledge on the subject didn't seem to stop her attacking trans people in defense of Woodford. So the idea that it'd exclude her from standing by trans rights in what Godless Cranium had suggested the secular community do to try and improve relations with the trans community made no sense outside of playing the field. She seems very good at this sort of manipulation. The only reason I mentioned her in the video was the fact that since I'd blocked her, various people had charged me with censoring her, and I feel like doing that may have given her too much. She seems to be trying to position herself into the same poor white cis woman that Woodford did with Selena Soul in his original video. And this is all just one more way to distract from the actual issue here. Cries to remove the human rights of trans women and attempts to avoid accountability when such transphobic content is called out. That's why I'm maintaining the block, that's why I will continue to refuse to deal with Oates. Before this, I didn't know she existed and my life was perfectly fine. In the few instances we spoke, she was incredibly hostile or entirely two-faced. That's all I need to know. I doubt my life will be worse for cutting her out. End quote. That was the last statement I'd make about Rachel Oates until the 2nd of September. But she never stopped going after me, as shown with the videos in August. And even then, when I had my big moment of weakness and unblocked her to tell her exactly what I thought of her continued support of Rationality Rules Transphobia, I replied to her post twice, realised that was a mistake, and went back to blocking her. But Rachel Oates wasn't having any of it. She called on her 100,000 subscribers to circumvent my block of her, mentioning that block in her tweet to try and force a further reaction from me. I didn't unblock. What I did do was detail my reasons for calling out Rachel Oates' transphobia, tell her why I wouldn't apologise for that, and even went so far as to include discussion on how she could begin to fix things with the trans community if she actually wanted to. I pinned said post to my wall, knowing it'd be seen by all the people Rachel Oates had just sent to harass me. That is the sum total of my so-called bullying. 4 replies on Twitter, 2 in May, 2 in September, a single passing mention in a video back in May, a single Facebook post explaining why I wouldn't unblock Oates in spite of her and her friends' protests back in May, and a thread posted to my own wall after she ordered her 100,000 subscribers to circumvent said block and abuse me in September. In response to which, Rachel Oates weaponized self-harm a mere week after she had accused me of doing the same, meaning she knew full well what she was doing. She was fully cognizant that she was adopting the methods of an abuser to silence criticism of her bigotry. She also stated that she was terrified of me, in spite of the fact that I was the only one of us who actually took steps to put barriers between us, barriers that she publicly flaunted. She could have blocked me in response, but she didn't. Instead, she chose to force a response so that she could then use it to present me as the aggressor. And I want you to keep that in mind as we go forward. Because all of this begs the question, why is she doing this? Why is Rachel Oates so desperate to hide the facts that it was her and her friends who repeatedly came after me in spite of me having her blocked? Why does she feel she gets to say whatever she wants, but the moment I criticize her, she screams bloody murder? Simply put, benevolent patriarchy. Rachel Oates knows that, as a white cis woman, she can be as violent and abusive towards marginalized people as she wants, and she'll be defended for it. In black circles, they have a name for this sort of person: Karen, a white woman, typically upper class, who uses her social privilege to enact violence against people of color, especially black people, and is used to being defended by society whilst doing so. Well, it's a similar thing here, only Oates has replaced racism with transmisogyny, knowing full well that most cis people, particularly cis men, are more than happy to bash the tranny in defense of her honor, especially a non-passing trans femme person like myself. And so that's what she's doing. She's exploiting that social leverage to enact violence on marginalized folk and silence all criticism that follows. And I say in defense of her honor because, let's be real here, the only thing I hurt was Oates' ego. I criticized her, offering her ways to better herself, and she couldn't take that. Thankfully, transmisogyny isn't nearly as bad as anti-black racism, meaning the violence targeted at me is relatively minor. But it's still an incredible degree of violence overall, and the methods used to inflict said violence share a lot of similarities, right down to the policing of both black and trans bodies. I also find it ironic that Oates accuses me of bullying, considering that if you've ever experienced reactive bullying, then you know exactly what she's doing. Now, what is a reactive bully? Well, they're the people who push and push and push until they get a response, only to then run off to the teacher and claim they're the victim. Except we're not children anymore, and Oates is weaponizing transphobia, systemic violence against all trans people, to do the heavy lifting, the very same transphobia that her close friend, Rationality Rules, was normalizing in the work she was defending him for. Darvo, deny wrongdoing, attack the accuser, and finally reverse the victim and offender. That is what Oates is doing. That's why she has to lie about having left me alone. Because when we're forced to face reality, we see a completely different picture to the one she's trying to sell. Not one of the evil trans femme bullying the white cis woman, but of a white cis woman weaponizing some of the most abusive methods and institutions to silence criticism of her bigotry. So, with that said, we are now done with the first sentence of Rachel Oates' post, meaning we can move on. And don't worry, the rest shouldn't take quite as much explaining.
So I'll say this one last time. There is no truth in any of their nasty claims. They are a bully with a vendetta against me. Nothing I ever do will be good enough for them. They're a mean person who has already driven me to hurt myself over and over and over in the past, and they won't stop.
Here's another one of Oates' staples, the assertion that others have lied without demonstration. Note how, when I say Oates lied about having left me alone for 3 months, I show where she said that, before showing you 2 pieces of evidence to prove that she was targeting me the week before. Something she could not have possibly forgotten, so that is clearly a deliberate lie on her behalf. Compare that to what Oates does here and elsewhere. She never shows an actual lie on my part, she instead relies on assertion and assertion alone. I think the best example of this can perhaps be found in her video, an in-depth response to lies about me, Essence of Thought is a lying bully. An hour and 15-minute video in which Oates doesn't demonstrate a single lie that I've apparently made about her. And if you're a fan of hers, please watch her video and see for yourself. All she actually does is read out our interactions, assert that she supports trans people, and conclude from her assertion alone that this proves she's not transphobic, ergo, I'm a liar. Except, that's not how it works. Well, that's not exactly all she does. She also spends way too long giving Woodford a glowing character testimony, but that's besides the point. And this ties into a bigger issue with Oates and the way she operates, and that's the way in which she is set on denying you, her audience, the information to make an informed conclusion. That's what this entire show has been about. I mean, I'm not publishing her private details, all I'm doing is sharing screenshots of our public interactions and clips from our videos. That's all. So why then is she so hellbent on putting an end to this? If she were telling the truth and I left stuff out, all she'd have to do is publish whatever I left out, thus proving me a liar. Meanwhile, if she were telling the truth and I was showing everything, anyone who looks at what I show you should reach the conclusion that my behavior is abusive. Either way, I'd lose. So why then is she fighting so hard to make sure that none of her audience, or indeed anyone, is allowed to see said evidence? Well, the only logical conclusion is that she's doing this because she's not telling the truth. She's attempting to limit the information you have access to for the same reason any abuser does, because she can't afford to let you make up your own mind on the basis of the evidence, because it's so damning of her character. That's why she treats me as this big threat to her, not because I'm dangerous to her as a person, but because my evidence-based approach is dangerous to her image, her brand. It completely destroys the idea that she's a kind and rational person who you can trust, which is not an excuse to weaponize self-harm, by the way. My rights, both as an individual and a trans person, supersede her brand. As for claiming that nothing I ever do will be good enough for them, again, not in line with the evidence. And to understand that, we need to talk about the time Rachel Oates favorited a comment offering to break my legs. Because it's not like making light of violence towards marginalized people normalizes said violence as a concept or anything, right? And yet, I never brought this up in my original video on Oates in September of 2019, after she had weaponized self-harm. Now, why is that? Well, because Oates had removed it and apologized, doing about as much as she could, so I didn't see a reason to keep bringing it up. It would have been very easy for me to revisit this when she'd weaponized self-harm, but I didn't. So clearly the me she's forwarding here is nothing but a parody she has invented. What's more is, I even told Oates how to fix things in 2019 after she ordered her 100,000 subscribers to circumvent my block of her. I detailed very clearly how she could begin tackling her transphobia And that's precisely why she weaponized self-harm. To bury that fact. So it's not, nothing I ever do will be good enough for them like Oates is pretending. It's, I refuse to actually do something to check my transphobia, so they're criticizing me for that. Which sounds much more reasonable. But Rachel Oates somehow manages to get even worse. For now she's not only claiming that I drove her to self-harm by criticizing her transphobia, but that I drove her close to suicide.
Last time I ended up in such a state, I came close to killing myself. I cut myself off from so many people and had to take months off work.
So now it's no longer just about self-harm, Rachel Oates has actually escalated things to suicide. Which doesn't make what she's doing any better. If anything, it makes it worse. Why? Well, because regardless of how my criticism of her transphobia made her feel, that's not my responsibility. If criticizing her transphobia impacted her life in any way, that's the result of her transphobia, not the criticism. Seeing this, I'm reminded of the time I blew the whistle on the man who groomed me when I was 15, only for his fans to tell me that what I was doing was wrong since it upset him and I could potentially tarnish his image. Well, fuck him, and for that matter, fuck Oates. They're the only ones responsible for their actions, and if having said actions laid out in public and criticised leads them to spiral out of control, well, that's on them. I will not be emotionally blackmailed now as I was then. Oates will just have to learn how to live with the true impact of her bigotry, both on the trans community and on her conscience. And I get that she'll assert that my criticism wasn't criticism, it was bullying, but she can't even mention anything substantial that I've done, as I can her. Because even before she weaponized her self-harm to silence me, even before she downplayed transphobic abuse as criticism and declared that targeting me with transphobic violence was treating me like a normal person, she'd already doxed members of a trans-focused mental health support group for creating resources to keep trans people safe. What really gets me about this interaction is the fact that Snarky didn't even mention the sharing of identifying information that could lead said person to being targeted. She was actually criticizing Oates for doing the very thing Oates was complaining about. Because this wasn't a blacklist, this was merely one or two lists created by a small group of people, many who fled the atheist community of Austin, to keep track of which content creators were known to be safe and which ones weren't, not yet anyway. Not to call them out publicly, but so that the trans people in the group could find out who were safe and who they should keep their eye on. But Snarky noted that, by posting it with the misinformation she did, Oates was actually doing what she was accusing the group of. That's all that was pointed out here. It's Rachel Oates who brings up the fact that she just published someone's real name, making them identifiable. Why does she bring this up? Because she assumes said criticism was about said doxing because of her own guilty conscience. Yet, in spite of this, she kept said posts up, where they stayed until she deleted her entire Twitter sometime in late 2020. There's something I like to call the foot standard. It's a basic thought experiment that goes like this. If we're in a dark room and I stand on your foot by accident without realizing, how would you normally expect me to react when you let me know? You'd expect me to remove my foot and apologize, right? After all, it was just an accident. Well, what if, rather than doing that, I just looked at you, went so, and kept my foot pressed down on yours? Well, at that point my actions would be morally indistinguishable from someone who had deliberately stood on your foot. Well, the same principle applies here. The fact that Oates kept the post up in spite of showing us that she clearly knew she had doxed someone is as bad as her deliberately doxing someone. But that isn't all Rachel Oates has done. We then have the fact that Rachel Oates published private emails sent to her in August of 2019 by a trans member of her audience, a trans man, warning Oates about the transphobia he had witnessed in her audience. She did this not to tell her audience to sort their behavior out, but to encourage it. She encouraged her audience to respond, mocking the emails to which she had already replied, so she clearly wasn't after input, letting every trans person in her audience know what she'd do to them if they ever questioned her, even in private. And yet, the people who got angry at me for publishing messages between myself and Woodford when he tried to gaslight me were silent. This is in spite of the fact that, unlike Woodford, this person wasn't someone being criticised for their content, they were a concerned audience member trying to bring attention to an issue they'd experienced firsthand. Sadly, I didn't see those emails at the time since I had been staying away from Rachel Oates since May. I only came to know them in December 2019, at which point I began talking to said trans person as a fellow victim of Rachel Oates' transphobia. That person was of course Levi, who, full disclaimer, is now my close and personal friend and editor for the channel. But that's two examples of clear transphobic violence on Rachel Oates' part, violence of which I was in no way involved. I was not part of the group until after this incident, and as already mentioned, I wouldn't make contact with Levi until months after the issue. So there's this in addition to everything Oates has done to me personally. Yet, returning to Rachel Oates, what examples of my harassment does she have? Genuinely. My first video about her, so excluding the singular passing mention in May, was defending myself from her defamation after she weaponized self-harm. So it can't be what caused it. But if you read the comments under her post, they make it sound like I was posting videos about her weekly. So why is it that I can pull out example after example of her abuse, yet she can't show a single one? Just a quick update, Rachel Oates has gone on to make the same claim, stating,
I didn't harm myself to silence anyone. I didn't harm myself for anyone. At that point, no one even knew I had a problem with self-harm. EOT had been harassing me for months, videos and hundreds of tweets calling me all sorts of names and swearing at me, and it got bad.
Now, where is the evidence of these hundreds of tweets, not to mention these videos I apparently made? Oh, well, you just have to take her word for it. And we'll return to this post in a couple of minutes to show you what her word is worth, so keep it in mind. I just wanted to show you that it isn't simply Oates' supporters making these assertions without evidence, she's doing the same. Anyway, back to the video. I mean, this is about as tangible as her posts get.
And their response was still to just call me names and say I deserved it.
So I called her names. I believe my exact words were that she's a transphobic piece of shit. I also stated that she was spewing shit and called her a guttermouth because of it. And that's it. So here I am talking about Oates trivializing transphobic violence, doxing members of a trans-focused mental health support group, and publishing private emails to train her audience to attack trans critics on site, but none of that matters. Oh no. Why? Because I called the white cis woman a transphobic piece of trash and accused her of lying after she spent months supporting someone seeking to strip me and every trans woman and AMAB trans femme person of numerous human rights. And I know I'm getting worked up, but it's a little fucking hard not to when I'm out here dealing with violations of both my humanity and my rights, and Oates' ego is so fucking fragile that she can't handle the facts that I'm not throwing myself at her feet and thanking her for her bigotry. Another thing that's important to point out is the fact that I said these things on the 2nd of September, so before she weaponized self-harm on the 4th. I have to make this clear on account of the fact that the way she has worded her post makes it sound like I came at her with this after she'd weaponized self-harm. Scratch that, Rachel Oates isn't implying, she's outright stating it. The very morning I'm recording this video, someone sent me this reply by her in which she very clearly states that these things followed her calling her 100,000 subscribers to circumvent my block of her, which happened on the 4th of September. The same day she weaponized her self-harm. I hope I don't have to explain to Oates' audience the problem with asserting what happened on the 2nd of September took place after the 4th of September. Yet that's not even her worst lie. She also makes a claim that the tweet in which I told Lizzie Lang, a white African, to leave Woodford's Church of Transphobia was not only about suicide, but that it was a reply to her. This is even though that tweet and the correction are still up, and as you can see very clearly, I was replying to Lizzie Lang. That's how desperate Rachel Oates is to rewrite history. That's how void of evidence she is. That she has to completely fabricate stuff. And by the way, in case it's not clear, this fact was detailed in my previous response, the very same video Rachel Oates is trying to make sure you can't watch by filing frivolous legal claims. Yet the conversation continued without her for the next 2 days, during which I told a white person in Africa to leave Woodford's Church of Transphobia, a comment that was later clipped and presented without context to make it appear like I told said person to commit suicide. I published a clarification, apologised to the couple of people who appeared genuinely hurt by the proliferation of said clipped quote, regardless of my intent, and that was it. Those people accepted my apology and moved on. Sadly, reason meant very little to our audience who were being whipped up into a bigoted fury. Do you remember that tweet responding to the white African telling them to leave Woodford's Church of Transphobia? Well, not only was it clipped to make it seem like I told said white African to commit suicide, all of a sudden said clipped tweet was me telling Rachel Oates, a British person, someone on a completely different continent, to commit suicide. That's how void of reasoning these accusations were, and I am still getting comments about this years later. I wonder why. Fact is, returning to the post I brought up just a few minutes ago, Rachel Oates has commented on this, claiming that she didn't know the tweet was about Lizzie Lang, stating,
They then started posting things about doing the world a favour and leaving it. I couldn't see whole Twitter threads because I was blocked. All I know is, I saw this in a thread about me, it seemed to be aimed at me, and I thought, maybe I will. And things got bad.
And yet, here she is on the 3rd of September 2019, the day before she weaponized self-harm, stating the following.
And finally to Lizzie Lang, who Oates' tweet was directed at. You were just trying to help me, and I'm so sorry you got caught up in this and that you've had to face the backlash that you have.
Emphasis by Rachel Oates. This right here is a person desperately trying to control the narrative when she's made so many lies that she can't possibly keep track of them and is starting to trip herself up. So returning to what I said earlier about taking her at her word, yeah, seems her word isn't exactly worth a whole lot. Anyway, back to our scheduled viewing. But that's all she has. I called her a few names and told her that she deserved to feel the consequences of her bigotry if she decided to continue down that path. All whilst her and her friends were attempting to justify stripping trans women of numerous human rights. And if that's too radical for you, if you don't understand why I said the mean thing at a time like that, then you are no ally to anyone. So with that made clear, let's continue by looking at why she's putting on this little show.
Don't give them any more time or attention. Let them scream their lies into the void.
And it's here that we get to the actual purpose of this post, and that is to inoculate her fans. She's seen the video, she's seen me playing the following clip repeatedly.
It's disgusting behaviour. My point is, you never ever ever try and control someone's behaviour by threatening violence against them or yourself. It is not okay and it is never ever acceptable. It is not okay and it is never ever acceptable. It is not okay and it is never ever acceptable. This is something I feel really, really strongly about.
Only for me to show her doing just that. Hell, she might have even seen some of the comments I showed you at the start of the video. She knows that if any of her fans outside of her radical core were to watch said video, were to actually see the evidence, well, it wouldn't end very well for her. Though I will take the whole let them scream into the void as permission to go ahead and publish my future work at a later date. So thank you.
And to EOT, I know you'll once again later twist this statement and say I'm sending 250,000 people around a block to harass you.
Actually, no. Why? Well, because unlike the last time in which you actually ordered your 100,000 subscribers to circumvent my blog review, even mentioning said block in said tweet, you haven't done that here. So why would I weaken the instance in which I can show you doing that by mixing in fake crap? Again, that's not how I operate. Go back and see the section on Oates favoriting comments offering to break my legs. I have all I need. So why would I risk everything by inventing stuff? This seems to be nothing but projection on Oates' part. And with that dealt with, all we have left is the final part of Oates' statement. So let's get this over with.
But here is my statement to you. Leave me alone, please. Just leave me alone. Stop talking about me. Stop lying about me. Just go away.
I'm sorry, Oates. I can't stop lying about you. Because I never started lying about you to begin with. Everything I have shown about you in my Rosa Dawn video, as with everything, was backed up with evidence, and you've done absolutely nothing to show otherwise. Ever. So yeah, that was her response. As already noted, nowhere does she actually demonstrate what she accuses me of. She merely doubles down on weaponizing self-harm and by extension, her transphobia. And her approach shows in her audience. Something I've been asked about is the lack of negative comments on my video, though I'm often accused of deleting them all, even by Oates herself. And yet, once again, that's demonstrably false. There's not a lack of negative comments because I have a ban on said comments. There's so few because the ones simply asserting that I lied, the ones asserting that there's no possibility of Oates being a transphobe, they're not actually there to have a conversation and therefore have no merit. There's no reason to let them through, though I have allowed through any comment actually interacting with the evidence, like Rosa Dawn's. I'm also more than happy to supply additional references. Those are the sorts of conversations I have, ones based on evidence and referencing, not word of mouth. And I think that's a completely valid standard to take. Reality isn't a popularity contest, and I wish people would stop acting like it was. Because what she did to me, the way she weaponized self-harm, transmisogyny, and benevolent patriarchy to silence my criticism of her and her friends, is the one thing that I have experienced that has even come close to the harm caused to me when I was raped as a child. Nothing else even registers on that scale. This was not some tit for tat. This was not drama. This was a horrific display of abuse that had an extreme impact on me and the people around me. I've had to seek years of therapy. I show PTSD symptoms anytime I criticize a cis white woman, and so much more that I'm not even ready to share yet. But all to say that, sometimes, I just wish I could fade out of existence and everyone would forget about me. To be clear, I don't feel suicidal. Just when I'm alone and being tortured by the memories of what Rachel Oates did to me, part of me wishes I could scrub myself from existence. Because part of me feels the trans community may have had a better chance this year if someone else had been the first to stand up in the secular community in 2019. That maybe Oates wouldn't have been successful in positioning them so she could weaponize self-harm in the way she did against me to silence the conversation. That's why it's taken me 3 years to even get the courage to make a video responding to someone else in which I even talk about what Oates did to me in detail. That is the level of violence she resorted to, and what's even more terrifying is the fact that she tried it again. Rachel Oates, as my abuser and a serial transphobe, does not get to shut down discussion of her actions whenever she's made to feel uncomfortable. If she can't handle criticism of her bigotry and her abusive behavior, then the only reasonable action is for her to remove herself from the public spotlight. Which, honestly, is what she should be doing anyway. Because whilst I provided her rather simple ways to make amends with the trans community for her actions in 2019, things have moved on. Not only did she choose to weaponize self-harm to silence criticism from a very vulnerable marginalized community, doing so in the way abusers actually do, but in doing so she helped lay the ground for the trans genocide currently taking place in the US. Because of those things, the choices Oates chose to make, fully cognizant of what she was doing, I'm of the opinion that she has gone over the moral event horizon, at least in regards to being a public figure. Because of her choice to do these things to marginalize people when criticized for her bigotry, there is no coming back from that as someone with an audience. The only responsible thing for her to do at this point is close down her Patreon, her YouTube, and all her related social media accounts and get a job that doesn't involve having an audience or a fan base, because she can't be trusted to not do this again. A fact this very post only goes to prove in how she's quite literally weaponizing her self-harm for a second time. This isn't hypothetical, this is happening again, and it is fucking dangerous. And just to be absolutely clear, since Oates is acting like not being allowed to have a position of influence online is a violation of her rights, it's not. Having said power is a privilege, one, she's destroyed for herself. Thankfully, for whatever reason, it's not quite having the same impact this time as it did before. Yes, we were flooded by her followers, but that's not the same as the abuse we'd received in 2019. The death threats are absent for a start. I don't know why. All I do know is that I am not about to be emotionally abused into staying silent a second time. I am going to do my videos documenting the full extent of Rachel Oates' abuse when I am ready. And there they will stand, monuments to some of her most heinous atrocities. Because if I don't get to live without feeling the impact of her bigoted and abusive behaviour, she sure as hell shouldn't either. And yet, before any of that, we need to do a video discussing the legal ramifications of her recent actions. That's to say, her attempted use of YouTube's legal claim system to silence said evidence-based criticism. But for that, you'll have to wait. If you appreciate what we do here and want to help out, please consider becoming one of our wonderful patrons who make all this possible. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Hannah Banghart, Gert Van Voorst, Sosh Daniels, Cthulhu, Higgins the Seagull, and Flynn. And for myself, Adita, and Levi, take care now.